Thanks, Richard. I think I've got a presentation that'll hopefully jump up on the screen in a moment. Firstly, if I can start by acknowledging country. We're here on lands of the Ngunnawal and Ambri. I pay my deepest respects to elders past and present. This land was stolen, never ceded, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So, look, it's really great to be here, and I think we've got a long-standing relationship with the Australia Institute, and I think it's when we can combine our forces, especially in a time of a progressive government, that we can really start to turn the wheel and hopefully look back on this time as a real inflection point, not just in relation to taxation, but in relation to a whole range of progressive policies. And I think as a movement, we've been really proud, in particular over the last few years, about some of the achievements we've had in terms of starting to turn back the clock when it comes to inequality in this country. And we think tax reform is a really important mechanism for us to start to turn our minds to. So really great to be here. But let's start with the obvious, and let's state it really plainly from the beginning. Australians are getting ripped off by the gas industry. The Petroleum Resource Rent Tax is the main instrument by which companies are meant to pay for the gas they extract from our sovereign lands and waters. It is literally the price they pay for the product that they sell. And that gas belongs to us, belongs to the people of Australia, and we should be getting a fair return for it. But we're not, and here's why. The PRRT is a rort on the Australian people. This has been an open secret for years. The gas industry is corrupting our politics and hurting our budget, not to mention the impact that it has on our climate. A full 2/3 of all projects that should be eligible have never paid a cent in PRRT. And that includes all of our major gas exports. I think Richard said it at the start of the day. And the rate of tax that we do collect from the PRRT is laughable. For every $100 of gas that we export, we collect about 43 cents. Not $43, 43 cents. PRRT is riddled with loopholes and deliberate obfuscations, with companies able to gain deductions, uplift rates to wriggle out of their obligations. It's an instrument that has been designed by the gas industry for the gas industry. And the Treasurer bravely opened it up for review in 2023, but the industry pulled out all the stops to prevent serious reform. They're also so successful that the already pathetic revenue that we take from the PRRT has actually gone down progressively every year since, dropping to less than $1.5 billion in the most recent 2024 figures. And the international comparisons are pretty telling. If we look around the world, Norway taxes its petroleum exports at 56%, and that's on top of its corporate tax rate. They'd use that revenue, as we all know, to amass the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, a gargantuan $1.8 trillion that used to underwrite social services, healthcare, renewable energy, education across the country. Qatar, very different economic and political system, but nonetheless, another top 3 gas exporting country. It taxes its gas exports at roughly 46%, again, on top of its corporate tax rate. In 2023, Qatar exported $83 billion worth of gas and collected $38 billion in export royalties. That same year, Australia exported $86 billion, so slightly more, worth of gas, but collected $1.9 billion from the PRRT. That's about 5% of what Qatar was able to net for the same amount of gas, actually for more gas. And the PRRT has become a real poster child for corporate capture in this country. It is a neutered instrument for serious revenue collection in order to line the pockets of the major gas companies. And unfortunately, it's not the only sort of example of this sort of scam. Richard mentioned before, the fuel tax credit scheme represents another totally unjustifiable multi-billion-dollar impost on the public, this time padding the pockets of our coal exporters. And the ACTU has called for major reform to this scheme as well. And hopefully we can address it too over the course of today. And we're not alone. I mean, let's be clear. Just listen to the Climate Change Authority in the former New South Wales Liberal Treasurer, Matt Keane, who says the fuel tax credit scheme is an insane and unconscionable waste of money that undercuts major Commonwealth goals on climate, on budget sustainability, and on intergenerational equity. What to do with the PRRT and the fuel tax credit scheme have in common? Well, they rob the Australian public of tens of billions of dollars annually. They incentivise climate pollution at a time when we must rapidly decarbonise. And they incentivise the prioritisation of export over domestic markets, jacking up prices on Australian consumers, but also on Australian businesses. I speak from my own experience coming from the AWU, who both covers workers in the offshore gas sector, but also who covers big membership in the downstream industrial base that relies upon gas as an input. And this is really killing Australian industry. We're having a debate about Tomago at the moment. When we think about just how strange and perverse it is that we are prioritising overseas gas markets and linking our Australian market to those prices, we're not even leveraging this competitive advantage that we have. And so when we think about the fix, so what do we do about it? Well, the ACTU has proposed a pretty simple solution. Scrap the broken PRRT and replace it with a 25% levy on liquefied natural gas exports. If we had this policy in place in the years that I just went through, we would have raised $17.1 billion. Still half of what Qatar raises for the same amount of gas, but a significantly more amount of money than what we've raised thus far. So instead, we have a do-nothing PRRT which raises less than 9% of that. What could Australia do with that extra $17.1 billion? Well, there's lots of things. We have a really big long lunch for every Australian. Be very nice. We could have redirected much needed gas to the domestic market to help those struggling businesses that I just spoke about. And when we think about solving some of the national crises that we could build an additional 50,000 social and affordable houses over 5 years with that sort of coin. That would more than double the number of homes expected to be built under the Housing Australia Future Fund. That's really starting to tackle things like intergenerational equity. We're talking about taking money from big gas corporations' super profits and using it to help young Australians afford their first home. And again, those resources and the money that's generated by it rightly belongs to the Australian people. We'd be taking back what's ours, all of the billions of dollars that disappear down the gurgler through the loopholes in the PRRT. So maybe the CEOs won't be able to afford that third vacation home, but thousands of young Australians will finally have a place of their own to call home. Major industrial gas users and the thousands, tens of thousands of people that work for them would have much more secure futures. These are the very businesses and industries that we need to make future Made in Australia a reality. What else could you do with $17.1 billion? Well, it's enough to pay an average size 7 kilowatt solar system for 2.5 million homes. And this would be a massive saving on household energy bills and hugely accelerate decarbonisation. But instead of securing Australia's industrial base and driving electrification to cut domestic power bills, the PRRT is incentivising climate pollution to boost international exports. A 25% gas export levy on LNG would do the opposite. It would shift into incentivising the gas companies who would sell more of their product domestically. That would go a long way to fixing potential gas shortfalls that they're always crowing about and significantly lower the costs for heavy industry in Australia. A 25% LNG export levy is a win-win. So why aren't we doing this? Well, for years, the gas industry has used its lobbying power and propaganda to block serious reform. And it's instructive to look at the arguments that they make. They like to brag about their total tax payments, which have risen since the rock bottom low of 2021. But a lot of that has to do with the profits that they have made off the Russia-Ukraine war, which have helped them rake in such eye-watering amounts of money that they could no longer sweep it under the rug anymore. It also reveals how aggressively they were getting away with it prior to the war. When the ATO, as Richard said, those pinkos up the road, labelled them as systematic non-payers. So really nothing much to brag about. And paying regular corporate tax is a separate question to whether they're paying the Australian public to export the gas owned by all of us. Norway's 56% export tax rate on its oil is on top of its 22% corporate rate, for a total of 78%. Qatar's export tax rate of 46% is on top of its corporate tax rate of 21%, for a total of 67%. Their focus, the gas companies' focus on corporate tax paid, is a deliberate distraction from the issue that we're talking about. The other thing we should point out, they like to point to the US, the world's largest LNG exporter, and they use it as a counterpoint to Norway and Qatar. And they're right. In Donald Trump's America, private gas companies rule. They make record profits off exports while paying little to no royalties at all. Should Australia really be following in this example, where corporations make out like bandits and the public has its social services sold off for scrap? That the gas industry would cite this comparison tells volumes about their worldview and their respect for the Australian public. They'd love to see what happens in the US these days. A country where income inequality is skyrocketing, where social services are cratering, and where billionaires will soon dance in a new ballroom at the White House while ordinary people struggle to afford healthcare and groceries. It's not surprising that we saw Woodside CEO hanging out with Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia earlier this year. They're not about fairness or about ensuring Australian workers, consumers, and businesses benefit from the abundance of resources we own. Moreover, they don't act in the interests of the Australian public. That is, unless we make it do it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching, and a very special thank you to all our supporters who help keep us running. We're not funded by political parties or fossil fuel companies or government, but by people like you who know the importance of evidence-based research in shaping the critical decisions facing Australia. If you'd like to support us to continue exposing inconvenient truths, challenging vested interests, and explaining the big issues in plain English, please consider making a tax-deductible contribution today. Visit our website australiainstitute.org.au to find out more.